right, I'm going to skip the mic. Hopefully everybody can hear me, and I'm going to fly through this. The good news is that I think I can do that pretty quick and still leave some time for questions. I think the next session starts at like 11:15 or something. So hopefully I can get through this in maybe like 20 minutes, leave a whole bunch of time for questions. Really quick, my name's Hot Lou. My real name's Lou Abramowski, but some people know me affectionately as Hot Lou. I'm a serial software entrepreneur. I was part of the founding team at a company called Our Family Wizard, which is now the biggest family management tool on the web. It's a local company. Not a lot of people have heard of it unless you've kind of gone through the tough situation of divorce. I was also the co-founder of a company called 8th Bridge. We won the Minnesota Cup Grand Prize in 2009. Now I'm the CEO founder of Evergreen. I also am the man of 100 birthdays, which we'll get to in a second. I live by the mantra that the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, and the second best time is today. Kind of a recurring theme throughout this presentation is that you simply are not publishing enough. And just a quick show of hands, how many people are either formally or informally a social media manager of some kind? All right, so a ton of us, good. So getting back to Man of 100 Birthdays. So back in 2010, I woke up on December 17th with an experience that I think we're all familiar with. I got hundreds of happy birthday messages from a bunch of my friends, acquaintances, and probably a handful of what I'd call veritable strangers, of people I hadn't probably talked to in like 15 years. So on the morning of December 18th, I thought it would be funny to change my birthday on Facebook to just see what would end up happening. And what probably doesn't surprise anybody, I got a whole bunch of happy birthday messages again. So on December 19th, I decided what would happen if I did it again. And of course, I got a whole bunch of happy birthday messages again. And at that point, I decided I'm going to keep doing this as a social experiment and see what happens by changing my birthday every single day. And I set a rule for myself that I would keep doing this until I got no more sincere happy birthday messages. Unbelievably, over 100 days passed until I got no more happy birthday messages. And now I think I've got like 1,700-ish connections on Facebook. Back then it was like 800. So I was pretty shocked because I set myself up for what I thought was a like 2-week chore. And of course it ended up lasting over 3 months. And kind of some funny things happened. Some people were not too happy to get this happy birthday kind of chore themselves, and I got a handful of unfriend threats just on Facebook, not in real life, but I'm not entirely sure. But still, even today, some people don't really believe it's my birthday, and it's been 9 years now. So, but after it was done, I kind of tried to look back and do a little bit of a postmortem and see what I could draw from that, because I was in the midst of building 8th Bridge at the time, which was a social media commerce platform for big retailers like Delta Airlines, Ticketmaster, 1-800-Flowers. And at the time, I think there was a lot of social media wisdom, but people were really still inventing social media marketing. So I thought, this happened on Facebook, what lessons can I draw? And the biggest one that I really learned was that the same content is going to resonate with people over and over and over. And the reason I thought that might be the case, and the conventional wisdom then, which still persists today, is that most social media content should be single serving. You publish it once, it evaporates into the ethos, and that's how you should strategize around publishing your content. But I knew, based on the fact that one really weird thing happened during this experiment, and it was specifically that I started getting happy birthday messages from the same people over and over that were sincere. So there were a couple of people that were in on the joke, and they were wishing me happy birthday every single day, and that was funny. But every couple of weeks, somebody would wish me happy birthday that I noticed had wished me a happy birthday a couple of weeks before. So the conclusion that I drew there was that sometimes people are going to interact with content again and again, either because they enjoyed that content, or sometimes they just plain forgot. And I think we've all had that experience, right? Where we go and maybe reshare this really funny meme that we came across, and strangely enough, it'll show up in like our Facebook memories multiple times because we forgot that we'd shared it or interacted with it before. So I started using this strategy on a handful of Facebook pages, including our corporate one and a couple of experimental pages. And I was also dating a children's entertainer at the time out at the Renaissance Festival named Twig the Fairy. And we used that strategy to build up her social media audience to over 250,000 followers. But I also started just building a handful of pages just to see if I could use this strategy to grow. And I created this little 15-minute marketing model for myself where every single day I was out there trying to either produce brand new stuff that I knew I could reuse over and over, so I wasn't trying to necessarily say Happy 4th of July or Merry Christmas. I was trying to come up with something that I thought might be relevant 6 months from now, and 3 years from now, and 5 years from now. Or I was curating other content, and I was scheduling it to be published, or I was publishing it manually. And then the stuff that worked best, I was just promoting it. So I would spend an ad, I would go cross-pollinate and share it on a different page, things like that. So over time, by the end of 2017, I actually had over 1,000 pages with what was 10.5 million followers. And at the time, my network was growing by over 10,000 followers every single day. Now that number is much larger, almost as if that isn't embarrassing enough, my network is much larger now. So anyway, so what, right? Well, like I said, the lesson you can draw from this, and that model, my experiment, is that anybody who's in a role formally or informally, you're simply just not publishing enough. And I'll kind of go through 3 myths here to hopefully really hammer home the idea. One myth is that most people think that publishing too often is annoying. Another myth is that recycling content over and over is boring. We'll address that in a second. And then another one is that everybody's trying to really hit some sort of home run every single time they're publishing. So let's hit myth number 1. And I'm going to go through this really, really quickly. But I think this is the one that scares people the most. People really feel like by publishing too often that they're going to be really, really annoying their fan base. And I can tell you decisively with tons and tons of data behind this that if you're annoying your fans, it's simply a product of the quality of your content, not a product of the frequency. And this is just one screenshot from the analytics of one of my pages where I decided to go from publishing what was 12 times a day down to 1 time a day and then back to 12 times a day, and you can see the difference. So again, I'm going to repeat this over and over, but for everybody that's doing any social media management, you're just simply not publishing enough. So myth number 2, that content is single serving and should be published once and only once. So I want to share a really interesting thing that happened with one of our Evergreen customers. So you can see this post right here was published at the time. It was really, really recently, and it had a handful of likes on it. And including one of those likes was a guy named Brian Laskin, who was actually the owner of that dental practice. What was interesting is that a few weeks before that, the exact same post had gone out, and it got fewer interactions the first time it was published, and none of those interactions happened to be from the owner of the page. The owner of the practice didn't even see his own post, and he didn't interact with it, and then the next time he saw it, it actually landed in his newsfeed, and he enjoyed it, and he had the exact same experience as a bunch of the other followers on the page. So you can see the difference right here. So anyway, you're not publishing enough. So myth number 3, every post needs to be a home run. So this is one of my experimental pages. It's called Baby Animals. I run all kinds of different experiments on it. And you can see this is a pretty cute photo of a baby bison, and it got what looks like, 9 likes and a share on it. Well, this page has over 12,000 followers on it. And I think anybody that's in social media would look at that and say, gosh, our social media strategy is a complete and utter failure. Like, why are only 9 people out of the 12,000 that follow this interacting with this? There's just a better look at it. Well, I'll show you another post that happened probably maybe a month and a half prior to that. This is organic reach. Now, there's no promotion behind this. The numbers on a page with 12,000 followers. This post reached over 1.1 million people. Now, there's almost no way we could have predicted this and made this happen just by guessing. We're going to be publishing once a day because we've got 12,000 followers, and we're just hoping for the best, predicting what's going to work out. So, the lesson I really hope that you can take away from this particular thing is that by publishing frequently, you're going to find that you have a chance for this to happen. And it comes at the expense of every once in a while one of your posts not performing quite as well as you want it to. But that's the risk that you need to take. And that's a risk that I think most people are using their own personal vanity from stopping them from publishing. The reality is that sometimes when those posts are only getting 8 or 9 likes, it hurts, right? You've got this big, large list and you want everybody to be interacting with it all the time. But the reality is that just because we see all of our posts as those publishers and that social media manager, when something falls flat, almost nobody sees it. You've got a page with 12,000 followers, and if one of your posts doesn't do very well, it's okay. You just move on to the next one. It's kind of like free A/B testing. And by publishing frequently, and on a page with 12,000 followers, we can get away with publishing literally every 2 hours and hope that one of those posts over the course of months or weeks is going to reach 1.1 million. I think everybody in this room, if they're running a page with something like 5 or 10,000 followers, would kill to get a post with 1.1 million reach, especially if you get a logo in it or had an awesome message behind your brand. So anyway, I think you guys get the idea. You're now publishing. So I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, how am I supposed to actually create this content? How am I supposed to be publishing 12 times a day on my page? Let me start with the types of categories that work. And these categories, by the way, are not mutually exclusive. You want to be publishing things that are inspirational, educational, or entertaining, and hopefully you understand that you can hit 2 or all 3 of these categories with most of your content. And I'll layer on one other thing. Most of this type of content falls under the category of it being evergreen. So for those who don't know and are uninitiated, evergreen content is just content that doesn't really have an expiration behind it. So I mentioned it earlier, content that has reference to the season or a current event or a holiday, that wouldn't be considered evergreen content. But something that was just an inspirational quote about running your own business, or if you've got a dental practice, maybe a before and after photo of some dental work. Things like that could inspire or educate. If you can layer on some humor and make it entertaining, that's really the golden ticket of awesome content, right? You can imagine if you had kind of a funny photo that's like maybe some before and after photos of some dental work. That's something that you could probably publish every 8 weeks for the rest of the existence of a dental practice, right? So I already explained this content that's relevant today, tomorrow, next year, etc. So I like to tell people the killer mix of social media is really use what I just described. 70% of your content should be published and just be pure evergreen content. So I layer on top of that, try to make it native. So what I mean by native is it doesn't click off the site in any way. It doesn't click off that post in any way. So don't tag other pages, don't put a link in it, maybe don't even put hashtags in that Facebook post. Just make pure native content that people are going to want to interact with and potentially share. Because every time they do that, there's a chance that one of their friends will see it. Or maybe another page, and another page that's much larger than yours might want to end up sharing it. And then I like to say, use that content to use it as a magnet to draw in followers, build their affinity with your page, build that loyalty, have them look forward to the content that they're getting in their newsfeed, and then spend a little bit of time doing some of the other types of things. Do some self-promotional content, because every time you spend a little bit of time putting out content that attracts new followers, every time you do something promotional, presumably you're not only reaching a larger audience, but you're reaching an audience that's a little bit more loyal and more interested in your content. And then I like to tell people, just mix in some news, so some current event things, and mix in some content that you see elsewhere on other pages, and just reshare their content. Those pages often will see that you shared it. They'll find your page, maybe start following it, and then reciprocate. Maybe not even as a back-scratching issue, but maybe they land on your page, really like the content, start following it, and eventually end up sharing your stuff. So, I know what a bunch of you guys are thinking right now. It's like, all right, that's a perfect social media strategy, but that's tough. And I'll tell you something. Of my more than 1,000 pages, almost all of them run just pure evergreen content. So it's literally just pure evergreen stuff. And every once in a while, if I need to do something self-promotional for it, whether it's driving traffic to a website, doing some sort of sale, I know my audience is going to be larger and more interested, and Facebook's more likely to show those posts to the followers, and you can rely on pretty much a perfectly evergreen strategy to grow your audience. So, how? It's hard to create, super hard to manage, it is harder to schedule, or at least it feels very tedious, right? And I'd say for most people running their business, social media ends up being one of the lowest priorities. You've got payroll, you've got HR, you've got actual sales, you've got other types of marketing, you've got customer service. All of these things seem to always trump social media, right? Because it's a lower return on investment compared to making sure your employees don't commit, right? Well, I've got some pretty good news. Hopefully you've got this understanding that, building evergreen content, and sometimes, I'll talk about this in a second, but sometimes taking something that feels newsworthy and reframing it as evergreen content is way easier than you think. And rather than waiting, let me just hit that home right now. One of the things that people will do is often take a photo from an event like Minibar, and they'll be like, our whole team is out at Minibar, hope to see you out there. And they post it once and only once. But it's really easy to post that single time, and then think about, actually that content could be really relevant in a year if you reframe it as, remember in 2019 when we all went out to Minibar and post that photo? Reframe newsworthy, current event type topics as evergreen content so that you can reuse it in the future. So on those days or weeks that go by where you have nothing else to share, you've got this content library that you can draw from and just republish some of that stuff. Of course, there's lots of tools to help. I'm going to show you what Evergreen does really, really briefly here in a second. But Buffer, Hootsuite, Canva, your own library, all of these things are super, super helpful. Everybody in here that's got their Facebook page probably has hundreds of posts in the past that they can go through and say, gosh, why don't I use this again? Or why don't I reframe the copy around this post from Minibar 2017 and republish it today? Lots and lots of tools out there to help. And I'd say don't overthink it. The biggest issue I see with people not creating any new content is they're just so worried about the vanity of not having a message come out perfect that they publish nothing. It's paralyzing. And I'll tell you that in social media in particular, there's this expectation that production value should be low, right? I'm sure all of you have had the experience of putting like 2.5 hours into like this perfect post. You wrote the copy, you took the perfect photo, maybe you even produced a video, added a bunch of music, you published it, and like 3 people interacted with it. And I'll tell you, that is just devastating. And what I tell people is really think about, you know what? I'm just going to publish this and see what happens. Because I can tell you, I've published tens of millions of pieces of content. I can almost never predict whether a cat with 12 toes is going to outperform the cutest baby bison photo I've ever seen. So anyway, I've got great news. Just really briefly, what Evergreen does is you can fill up an Evergreen content library with images and videos, and Evergreen will automatically publish on a schedule and a frequency that you choose whenever you're not publishing. So Evergreen detects if your page has gone dormant, and it grabs your Evergreen content library and publishes from it on whatever frequency you pick. And if you decide, okay, I do have something to publish on my own and publish it, Evergreen will automatically shut off for you and won't turn back on until that frequency has expired and you've gone dormant again. I've got a $1 free trial for 14 days. It's got unlimited publishing on Facebook and Twitter. Also, if you end up signing up for it, you get monthly emails with just a bunch of tips and tactics and exploring a bunch of different weird experiments, because I showed about 1% of the experiments that I've done over the last 10 years. And I should mention too that I just recorded the first 3 episodes of my podcast last week, so I'll be launching that soon, where I talk in depth about every single one of those experiments. If you want that, if you end up signing up for the trial, you'll get emails when it gets launched. But also, if you just want to email me at hotblue@gmail.com, just say podcast, and I'll make sure to alert you when those get published. I'll give you a 14-day money-back guarantee on that $1 trial for the 14 days if you want. And to check it out, to activate the $1 trial, you just go to evergreen.app/minibar. The last thing I want to say, and thanks so much for your patience at the beginning and getting through all of this, is I know a lot of people are like, I'm not sure where to start with social media, or maybe you've got a good idea and you've got a little bit of a sense of what you're doing, but you don't feel like you're as good as maybe Gary Vaynerchuk or Mari Smith just yet. But let me tell you, you will never, ever, ever be good at anything unless you're willing to suck at it for a little bit. And hopefully, a couple of the things that I've talked about today really hammered home about the importance of publishing frequently, listening to the results, maybe figuring out what else works. But thanks so much for letting me go through my 45-minute presentation in about 19 minutes. So I don't know how much time we have left, probably like 5 minutes or something like that, but questions, go ahead.
You mentioned posting 12 times for a page that has 10,000, 12,000 followers, that's okay. How about someone that's just starting out with social media, that's 300 to 500?
Yeah, so generally, until I get to the 1,000 mark, I'm probably only publishing once a day, and maybe here and there a couple more times. But man, once you get to 5,000, there is like literally no amount that is too much. And I mean that. I've published 14,000 times in one day on my page. What's up?
What is the minimum amount of content you should have on a page before trying to
I wouldn't worry too much about that. Feel free, if you're doing self-promotional stuff and it's not resonating with people, Facebook just won't distribute it. And that should tell you, my message was wrong or my audience isn't big enough. Let me try something else, grow the audience, redo the marketing. Sorry, your question.
Would you consider a special rate for nonprofits for Evergreen?
I would, yeah. What's up?
Your recommendations that you had today, seems like it's kind of primarily around Facebook, but would you say it's like cross-platform, Instagram, LinkedIn, or would you modify that in any way?
I would say with Instagram, there is a very, the community aspect of it is, I would not publish full content on Instagram, both because I think there's an expectation of it being visually appealing that you don't see on the other platforms. And it's much harder to gain followers on Instagram by just publishing frequently. The algorithms, I think, on Facebook specifically are much stronger. LinkedIn, I don't have a great ton of experience with that necessarily, but what I do find is that you have a lot more freedom in being self-promotional on LinkedIn in other places, and long-form content and video content is crushing as far as I've heard. So feel free to take a slightly different approach there. And I don't know if Evergreen Content's right for LinkedIn for that, so I don't have a perfect answer for that. But I think the general strategy of publishing frequently, don't hold yourself to too high of a standard that stops you from publishing anything, because publishing nothing guarantees nobody sees you. Publishing something, at least you'll get some feedback. What's up?
Same thing with Twitter. Twitter, following
Twitter, there's no limit to how much you can follow. None. I think the half-life of a Twitter post is like 2 minutes. So after 8 minutes, probably 95% of the people who will ever see that tweet have seen it. And I have to tell this story because one of my early experiments on Twitter was I was building a Twig the Fairy's Facebook page and her Twitter at the same time. And after like 6 months, I had 20,000 followers on Facebook and like 211 on Twitter. And I was like, screw this. I'm gonna fully automate Twitter and go from publishing some good content a few times a day to I publish every 36 minutes the same 100 posts for 4 years. I never changed it, ever. And after like a year and a half, we had like over 10,000 followers. So I had way better success automating the same 100 posts going out all the time. Nobody once in 4 years ever said, do you realize you're just posting the same thing over and over every 30 minutes? Not once. What's up?
How encouraging or discouraging were these platforms with the automated?
So Instagram's total anti-automation. I don't know if Evergreen will ever support, or Instagram will ever support Evergreen. Talking with their development team to try to, or their policy team to figure out, what it would look like. But I would discourage everybody in here from trying anything automated on Instagram because their terms of service are very explicit about it, and their detection methods are very powerful, and you can get your account shut down like very easily. So Facebook's stance on it is effectively that the creator needs to know what's being published. So nothing can come from the ethos automatically in there. Twitter's the wild, wild west. I don't think they care. Like I said with this bot that I did for Twig the Fairy, occasionally, because I had replies in there too, I saw bots talking to bots. There's just like a 24-hour conversation with my fairy bot and some other like promotional bot. So keep that in mind. So.
Sorry, I don't think it's my business as well, but the pages would stuck at like 150 followers, probably like your account, and don't post too frequently because I'm really worried that like with algorithms and all, there's not a lot of interactions from people that picture posts we see less and less.
So that goes back to what I said early on. If you're not getting any interactions, it's a product of the quality of your content, not the frequency. So I'd look back at the best performing posts and figure out what did work and try to reuse that stuff or reframe it or use it as a technique to repost it, to use some sort of category to publish similar things in the future. But I'd also say publish every single day with 150 followers. And if something in the last 60 posts performed way better than the rest of them, I'd run an ad for 30 days for $1 a day to try to get new page likes using that exact creative that you used of the best performing out of the last 60. And I promise you your page will grow. I promise. No. Native content. It can be promotional. Yeah, it can be promotional in the content, but it cannot be a link outside. Okay, so you use the best performing image that worked organically in that ad to attract new followers in a page link ad. And we can talk, I'll give you my card and you can shoot some messages. What's up? 15-second video ads and the interstitial story ads that are low production value, probably with the front-facing camera, just promoting yourself in that, those ads are crushing right now. There's no way to have an ad specifically with the objective of growing followers today. I imagine that will come someday, but man, if you can have a really good, engaging 15-second low production value video that screams authenticity, those, I mean, I have a customer that's running an ad like that, but getting 2 views all the way through 15 seconds for 1 cent. Every penny they spend, they get 2 views all the way through that 15 second ad. It's probably the best performing ad on the internet right now. That 15-second social story ad. Any other questions? Well, I'll pause here as you guys think about this, but I've got a bunch of cards up here. I'm always willing to give a bunch of free advice, so if you just wanted to email me or something, or just email me at hotloo@gmail.com. I'll let you know when that podcast comes out. I'm hoping in about 2 weeks we've already got 3 episodes recorded, so I imagine we'll be publishing those weekly in about 2 weeks here. But yeah, evergreen.app/minibar, you can try it. Try Evergreen free for 2 weeks for $1 with that money back guarantee. And yeah, I want to thank you guys for letting me rush through that and dealing with the technical difficulties. Have a great week, guys.